Welcome to my vodcast. Today we'll be looking at design and using meaningful feedback for teaching industrial technology. So let's start by summarising an article by Ann Poulos and Mary Jane Mahoney called Effectiveness of Feedback, the Student's Perspective. I will summarise this article in 3 parts. First the introduction, then the method of gaining results, and lastly the discussion. This article looks at how students perceive feedback from teachers and how it can be used effectively for student learning. A useful definition of feedback, which has been used by many researchers, relates to information presented that allows comparison between an actual outcome and a desired outcome, Morey 2004. It is suggested that the primary role of feedback is as communication, which provides a critical function in knowledge acquisition. The article then goes on to define 2 types of feedback: effective feedback and general feedback. Effective feedback refers to feedback that is both appropriate and timely to the student, and which is also suited to the present situation. General feedback refers to feedback given on a base level. It is often used for an entire class and/or group rather than individually. The article then states that general feedback that relates to the learning intentions of a course benefits the cohesion of student learning. The article also talks about equity in feedback. Knight and Yark indicate that there must be equity in feedback, meaning different feedback based on a student's ability and performance. Feedback must therefore be seen as an opportunity for learning and encouraging for students to achieve goals. Now to look at Part 2, results. This article returned results based on 3 key dimensions relating to the effectiveness of feedback. These dimensions were perceptions of feedback, impact of feedback, and credibility of feedback. Key dimension 1, the perceptions of feedback, looked at the students' perceptions of feedback related to individual meaning attributed to feedback, the accessibility of lecturers to provide feedback, types of feedback, feedback related to criteria, and marks and comments. Key dimension 2, the impacts of feedback. This dimension looked at the impact of feedback and how it was related to the timelessness, the significance, and the experience of the feedback given by the teacher to the students. Key dimension 3 looked at the credibility of feedback. This looked at the usefulness of feedback provided, and hence its credibility was related to the students' perceptions of the lecturer's ability, and generally also their biases influenced the credibility of the feedback provided. Now for Part 3, discussion and conclusion. In conclusion, from the research findings, this article states 2 main points. Firstly, general feedback versus specific feedback. Students preferred specific rather than general feedback. This conflicted with the evidence of Knight and York, which indicated the superior power of general feedback. However, in this study, general feedback was assumed to be a feedback provided to the whole class, which did not necessarily relate to them as individuals, hence why students define specific feedback as more effective for learning. Secondly, students struggled to define feedback. Students struggled to recognize and use feedback according to the finding in this article. This is a very key finding, and implications need to be made relating to the implementation of feedback to student learning. Now looking at strategies for teaching and learning. Specific strategies for teaching and learning related to Stage 6 industrial technologies for feedback include: firstly, feedback should complement. Focus on the feedback should be based essentially on what the student is doing right. It is most productive to a student learning when they are provided with an explanation, an example, as to what is accurate and inaccurate about their work. For example, the teacher should firstly compliment the student on their work, then correct the problem, and then again compliment the student on their effort. Secondly, feedback should be given on time. When feedback is given immediately after showing proof of learning, the student responds positively and remembers the experience about what is being learned in a confident manner. You should aim to give your students feedback straight after a task is complete and/or a design problem is encountered or resolved. 3. Be sensitive to the individual's needs and the student. It is vital that we take into consideration each student individually when giving feedback. This is because classrooms are diverse and have a variety of ways students learn. Aim to cater for an individual based on their specific needs. For example, students who learn visually compared to verbally need a different style of feedback to be effective. Number 4. Ask the 4 questions. Providing answers to the following 4 questions on a regular basis will help provide quality feedback. The questions that need to be asked are: what can the student do? What can't the student do? How does the student's work compare with that of others? And how can the student do better? Number 5, one-on-one. Providing a one-on-one meeting with a student is most effective for providing feedback. The student will look forward to having the attention and allows the opportunity to ask necessary questions. This strategy is very important, especially in the industrial technology area. Number 6, feedback can be given verbally, non-verbally, or in a written form. Be sure to use a variety of feedback strategies when teaching. This will enhance student learning. For example, a written reflection of a student's design folio. Number 7, teach students on how to give feedback to each other. Model for students what appropriate feedback looks like and sounds like. When students learn how to give feedback to their peers, then they can effectively help them through their design problems and their processes. Number 8, give genuine praise. Students are quick to figure out which teachers use meaningless praise to win approval. Make sure you as a teacher give praise, but vary how you implement praise and suit it to the individual's efforts and performance. Now to reflect on learning. From this professional research assessment, I have learned about 3 new points, which include the effects of feedback, how to make feedback effective, and how to implement feedback. Firstly, I'm going to look at the effects of feedback. By completing this podcast, I've become more knowledgeable about how important feedback is for learning. If feedback is not used effectively or at all, students will lose crucial skills and knowledge as they will not be able to reflect on their learning as effectively. Number 2, how to make effective feedback. I've learned that feedback can be made effective in many ways, which include providing feedback in a timely fashion, giving specific feedback to the student's task, varying feedback to suit a diverse range of students, and by following the 4-question method listed in the strategies, feedback can be made effective. Number 3, how to implement feedback. I've learned through this assessment that the implementation of feedback is crucial for learning. It will benefit students if used correctly. For example, general feedback is great for a whole class event, though if used on individuals, it is very ineffective. Individual students need specific feedback relating to a single task or an event based on their own learning. Though overall, I've greatly increased my knowledge of feedback in teaching and learning with my newfound knowledge of feedback. I'll be able to implement effective feedback to my students through one of the one-on-one conversations, appraisal of students, etc. Within my desired industrial technology field, feedback is very important and needs to be timely, as students need to consistently be given feedback to work on their projects, their problems and their solutions within the classroom. Now to look at challenges I faced during this assessment. The challenges that I encountered on this assessment include finding an article that clearly relates to my topic of meaningful feedback for teaching, overcoming procrastination, time allocation and family issues, and defining and designing a vodcast that is coherent and well structured. So that's all for today. Thank you for listening.